The unofficial competition between the People's Republic of China and the United States for global influence has dominated news headlines and has been the subject of intense study. Analysts from a wide spectrum of political viewpoints have made various conjectures about the future of China. But how exactly did China get to this position? Why is China's foreign policy what it is? Geography has a significant influence over China's policy both domestically and abroad. Like Russia, China was primarily a land power, not a naval power. China's position on the globe facilitates maritime trade due to the shorter distances required to trade abroad. For much of history, China had not aspired to become a global power similar to the US today or Britain before it. Chinese merchants traveled long distances around the world to trade goods, but China did not possess the means nor the desire to police the oceans and impose its will on far-flung countries. China's history began around 4,000 years ago in a region called the North China Plain. The Chinese refer to this area as the Central Plain. This region of China is now one of the most densely populated areas of the world. The Yellow River, which flows through this plain, is nicknamed the Scourge of the Sons of Han due to its constant flooding. It was not until the 1950s that the area began to industrialize. This industrialization has been accelerating at a rapid rate over the last 4 decades. In his 2015 book, Prisoners of Geography, author Tim Marshall writes, "Nevertheless, the Yellow River is to China what the Nile is to Egypt, the cradle of its civilization, where its people learned to farm and to make paper and gunpowder." North of the North China Plain is the Gobi Desert in today's Mongolia. To its west, the land rises until becoming the Tibetan Plateau and extends all the way to the Himalayas. To the south and southeast of the North China Plain is the sea. The North China Plain is an expansive fertile plain with 2 rivers flowing through it and has a climate that permits the harvesting of rice and soybeans twice a year, encouraging population growth. Approximately 1 billion people live on the North China Plain. This is an area half the size of the United States, a country with around 330 million people. At some point between 605 and 609 CE, the Grand Canal, the world's longest man-made waterway, was extended and linked the Yellow and Yangtze rivers together. The Han people make up over 90% of the Chinese population. They dominate Chinese politics and business too. While there are regional linguistic differences among them, the Han people are united by ethnicity and by geopolitical desire to protect the Chinese heartland. Mandarin Chinese, which came from the northern part of the region, is the lingua franca of the Han people. Like her northern neighbor Russia, China decided that the best defense was a strong offense. Among the Han, there was a sense that they were an island of civilization surrounded by barbarian neighbors. The Great Wall, called the Long Wall in China, was built by the Qin dynasty in the 3rd century BCE. By the 11th century CE, the Han people put aside their own quarrels and directed their attention toward the Mongol hordes invading from the north. By 1279, Mongol Emperor Kublai Khan became the first foreigner to rule over all of China, establishing the Yuan dynasty. Nearly 9 decades would pass before the Han people regained control over their own affairs with the start of the Ming dynasty. China established commercial relationships with the new nation-states of Europe, such as Portugal and Spain. The Chinese leadership limited the Europeans' presence to the coast. As would be the case throughout China's history, China's coasts benefited most from outside trade, while the Chinese interior benefited very little. This lack of inclusive growth in the Chinese countryside has driven more and more people to these coastal urban areas. During the 18th century, China expanded into modern-day Burma and Indochina. Also, the region of Xinjiang had been absorbed into China during this time. Xinjiang is an area of deserts and rugged mountain peaks about 643,000 square miles in size. That is roughly twice the size of the state of Texas. Xinjiang, a majority Muslim region, would be a constant thorn in the side of Chinese leaders over the centuries. In the 19th and 20th centuries, the European powers encroached upon China and drew up their own spheres of influence within China. Interestingly, Tsingtao Brewery, China's second largest brewery and one of China's most widely exported beer brands, was founded in 1903 by German settlers in the German-controlled city of Tsingtao, now Qingdao. The century of humiliation narrative prevails in modern China. Author Tim Marshall says, "This is a narrative the Communist Party uses frequently. It is in part true, but it is also useful in covering up the party's own failures and repressive policies. For China, the first few decades of the 20th century would see a series of rebellions and wars which wrought havoc on the country. After Mao Zedong forced Chiang Kai-shek and his nationalist government off the Chinese mainland, he set out to transform China. The Chinese annexed Tibet in 1951 and increased their influence over neighboring Mongolia. While the new People's Republic of China was extremely poor, the country was united and Chairman Mao wanted to keep it that way. Upon Mao's death, the People's Republic of China, under Deng Xiaoping's leadership, moved closer to the rest of the world rather than in the opposite direction. The Chinese leadership liberalized the country's economy and encouraged foreign investment in China. According to figures from the World Bank, the People's Republic of China has lifted approximately 800 million people out of poverty over the last 4 decades. The PRC now leads the world in wind and solar power production and has the United States beat in 5G technology, just to name a few areas. In his 2013 book, China Goes Global, American political scientist David Shambaugh wrote, "I argue in this book that China has a very long way to go before it becomes, if it ever becomes, a true global power, and it will never rule the world." He goes on to say, "I argue that China's global posture is beset by multiple weaknesses, not the least of which are at home, and that the nation's strengths are not as strong as they seem on face value. I further argue that China remains a lonely power, lacking close friends and possessing no allies. Chinese policy, like in any other country, is shaped by its unique geography and history. The China of 2023 is a vastly different place from the China of 1973. Still, the PRC has many obstacles hindering its development into a true global hegemon. Its aging population and lack of soft power around the world are 2 of China's major obstacles." One scholar noted, "China doesn't have the desire or history to be a hegemon, but we do want to be a leader." What do you guys think? Does China's geography help or hinder China? Do you agree or disagree with David Shambaugh's assessment? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching.